Hello and welcome to the Powered by Rock podcast. We're only speaking with Ken Haas from Reverend Guitars today. Reverend Guitars is actually celebrating their 25th anniversary this year. And it's pretty safe to say that if you're a guitar player, you've probably heard of them by now. Ken is the CEO of Reverend Guitars, and he plays in Navarro and the Traitors, the Polka Floyd Show, and Zimmerman Twins as a guitarist and vocalist as well. He's not just a suit and tie at a company. He's a musician first and foremost. And man, I will say from watching his videos on YouTube, he can absolutely play. I'm going to be speaking with Ken about the long journey so far, the company's history, the uniqueness of their guitars, and where Reverend goes from here right after this.
You're listening to the Powered by Rock podcast with your host, Isaac Kuhlman. The Powered by Rock podcast was created to help showcase some of the best rock musicians in the world and to pass on to future generations the rock music that has inspired rock fans around the world for decades. We want listeners to be able to hear great stories and life experiences directly from their favorite artists, as well as dig deeper into music theory and talk rock like no other show you've ever heard. This isn't about looking cool, it's about getting real and having a great time. Without further ado, let's start the show.
All right. Hello and welcome to the Powered by Rock podcast. Today is going to be a pretty cool episode for guitar players, especially. But if you don't play guitar, don't worry. It's a little bit of like rock history as well. So you're going to enjoy hearing today's episode as well, because I'm going to be speaking with Ken Haas from Reverend Guitars. Hey, Ken, how's it going?
It's going great. How about you?
Fantastic. So let's kind of just dig in here, because I think, it's one of these things where when I finally get to speak to somebody who, is in the music industry and not just a musician, somebody who's actually got a business in the industry, it kind of changes the direction of the conversation. But I do want to talk about your personal history with rock music. You were playing kind of just as a setup to how you even got to where you are today, because most people are going to be like, I play in a band, but I have no idea how to run a business or have no concept of how that could happen. So how did that kind of work out from going from musician to becoming a CEO at Reverend Guitars?
So how much time did you have?
We got all day, no problem.
Wow. Well, that's a good one.
Yeah.
So I started playing in bands when I was a teenager, and I did my first bar gig when I was 16. And I loved it, and I had to pick something to do with my life. So I picked wrong a whole bunch of times. But the one thing that was consistent was that I was always playing in bands. And I was inspired in the middle 80s by, it's become sort of a weird cliche, I think, to say, well, I mean, I was into alternative music before Nirvana. People are big on that, but I was.
Yeah,
and
if you listen to the Pixies, obviously you like Nirvana, or you like grunge and all that kind of stuff beforehand.
I was more I was into the bands that had leads. So I really liked a lot of the stuff that was going on at SST in the 80s. Mm-hmm. I was a big fan of Black Flag. I mean, let's face it, Greg Ginn was a big inspiration on my guitar playing. But I like that later era Flag, Rollins era Flag stuff that nobody likes. Yeah. I'm really into that. I'm really into Dag Nasty and the Descendants and Steve Edgerton from All, and all of the bands that came along on Cruise Records after that. So Chemical People and Big Drill Car and a lot of those bands. Those are the bands that we opened up for as kids, and the guys that I looked up to, as players, because and I'm not like, I don't want to like diss on other stuff from that era or whatever, but just sort of the straight bar chord stuff didn't interest me as much as the stuff where the guys were really throwing some leads in, because it was an interesting format that made for some really chaotic lead guitar playing.
Sure.
And I really liked all that. And yeah, a lot of that does flow into like the Pixies and bands that sort of skirted that alternative thing, all the stuff that Husker Du brought about. Sure. And then of course everything that Watt did in his career after the Minutemen. Firehose is one of my all-time favorite bands. And so it wasn't just the distorted guitar stuff either, it was just a little bit of everything. And so my bands were always like the opening band for those nationals, or we were like our own sort of weird headlining thing, but we were never trying to be trendy, so we were never insanely popular in the Detroit area. We, like this is another one of those bad cliches that people talk about, but I was literally in the band that all the other bands came to see. Like we had this like great drummer and we played weird shit. And so other musicians liked it, but non-musicians didn't get it. And so, which is fine. I mean, after a while that, that can be its own thing. And along with the playing music and stuff, I, like a lot of guitar players, just became fascinated with the guitar itself. And that started early. I learned how to play largely on a 68 Telecaster, vintage Telecaster with a 65 Twin that belonged to my uncle, who passed away when I was 11. And I couldn't make that rig sound like, Greg Ginn.
Yeah.
So I started experimenting with humbucker guitars and doing things, and at one of my first, like the bands have different incarnations and stuff like that, but one of the first shows that I can really remember when I was about 20, we opened up for Big Drill Car at a club called Blondie's in Detroit. And the guitar player from Big Drill Car was kind of famous for playing this white Ibanez RG 550. And I had never seen one before. While I have a lot of appreciation for Steve Vai now, at the time, that name didn't mean anything to me. And he kept, popping these harmonics and hitting the trem bar and stuff. And I was like, what's that? And then I became, and I became fascinated with the Floyd. My first real guitar that I bought for myself was Ibanez RG 570 in Jewel Blue, which I still have. And that was my main and almost only guitar for 6 or 7 years. And it sort of started me down this weird path of guitar appreciation, and because I had this vintage thing that everybody loved, and I had this modern thing that a whole different group of people loved, and I could sort of appreciate both of them,
Yeah.
And so when I started collecting guitars, I didn't really have a preconceived notion of what worked for me, and I never really became hyper focused on any one brand. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So as I rolled through my 20s, I was doing sales. I was raising a young family. I got married young, and I was doing on the road sales, selling automotive stuff, paint, sandpaper, body shop supplies. And it took me all around southeastern Michigan and northwest Ohio, and off into western Michigan, sometimes Chicago. And so while I was traveling for that job, I would stop at guitar stores all the time, because that's what guitar players do.
Yeah.
And talk to all the people that ran all these guitar stores and play my favorites. And I made a lot of friends, and some that I'm still in touch with now from those days, And I started buying and selling guitars. I made some pretty decent money as a salesperson for a while there. Probably, for a 20-something guy, it was dangerous for a minute.
Yeah.
But I was good at sales, so whatever. So I started buying and selling a lot of guitars, and it used modern stuff, but vintage stuff here and there. And I sort of started to pick up on what I liked about different instruments, and what some of my favorites are, some of which I still have. Guitars that have been moving around with me for 30 years now that I'm 50-something. 52. So there was all that. So then how the Reverend story developed is in those travels from that sales job. I walked into a buy-sell trade sort of music store, and I saw a Reverend guitar hanging on the wall. And it had the vibe of, it was one of our original models, and it had the vibe kind of a Charvel Surfcaster. And I really dug it. It had a humbucker in the bridge, which I knew I liked, but it had a bolt-on neck, which I had preferred. And so I bought this guitar and really connected to it. And it said East Point, Michigan right there on the headstock, which was only about 45 minutes away from where I lived. So back in those days, I grabbed a phone book and looked it up, and Naylor was in the phone book. And I got an address and went and knocked on the door and started selling him some sandpaper. And and then he and I became really good friends. And so here's the other part of the story it's funny to me because I've heard a number of people say different versions of this over the years. But Joe and I got to be pretty close. And he asked me if I wanted to go to the NAMM show with him. Yeah. This would be the summer of '99. And I had been fascinated with guitars and playing in bands for 12 years at this point, and I had no idea really what the NAMM show was other than the occasional mention of it in a guitar magazine, under new releases or whatever. And so of course I accepted. And when I went to that show, I knew right away that I was doing the wrong thing with my life. And so at this point, I'm just shy of 30, and I'm looking out in this old Nashville Convention Center. There was a place you could stand, you could see all the displays, and I'm looking out over the sea of displays, and I see there's Joe and Reverend right below me, and then Gibson had their trailer inside, and they're over here, and Ibanez had a big thing, Fender had a big thing, and I was like, oh. Wait, I should be here. I just knew that it was like something like organized. And so from that moment forward, everything that I did was to move in that direction.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I stayed selling in sales for a number of years. I started working for Joe part-time. So at that NAMM show, I sold a handful of guitars to some notorious players. The main one being Will Ray from the Helicasters bought a couple of Reverends off of Joe. And Joe was really surprised. How did you get him to come over here? And I didn't really realize that I had done anything. I was talking to Will in another booth, and he asked me, he's like, Reverend Guitars, I've never heard of that. What's that? And I just explained it to him and why I was so excited about it, and why I was there. And Will kind of picked up on my enthusiasm and went and bought a couple of guitars from Joe. So then Joe said, well, hey, I would like to bring you to all of these shows.
Yeah.
And I need you to do that over and over and over again. And so it was cool. So all of a sudden I had all expense paid trip to every NAMM show. And at that point, this is where the story gets a little strange. I moved into Toledo, Ohio, Northwest Ohio, and I married my lovely wife and business partner, Penny Haas, who runs Reverend Guitars with me. And I had an opportunity to get out of the aftermarket car business, the selling of shop supplies and stuff,
sure.
and open a actual car business with a bandmate of mine at the time who was like a car salesman who was good at it. And what I brought to that relationship was a knowledge of what happens in body shops,
sure.
And paint matching and repair things, because I used to train people to paint cars and stuff back in the day. So and the idea was that we would buy clean used cars because I could spot bad repairs and this and that. Sure. And we went into business for a few years, and that business is horrible. I thought the paint business was bad for your soul, and nothing is more brutal than the used car business.
Yeah.
No matter how honest you try to be with people, they think you're a liar.
Sure.
And my personality didn't suit that very well. And I got very tired of it very, very quickly.
Yeah.
But not as quickly as my partner, who I had to get rid of real fast. And And then I'm basically stuck running this business. So I taught myself like crash course how to do my own books. I went to the, the school of rock, as it were. I mean, I didn't have any of that. I don't have an accounting degree or a business degree or any of these things. So here I am all of a sudden at the helm of this business, and I learned a lot. I gained a lot of experience. I gained a lot of experience in running a small business and dealing with finances and again, sort of keeping my own books, and it was good. And I had to get out of it. What I learned was that there was no money in that business. So I got out of it. And around the time I was closing that business, Joe Naylor was starting a new line of guitars for Reverend that he was calling the Stage King, which included, where is it? There, that Jetstream right there. It was one of the original models in the Stage King series. And he was really excited about them. And I was he sent me some guitars to try in advance of an upcoming NAMM show. And I was pretty excited about him too. And so I sort of made him an offer, like I wanted to work for him full time for a month or two. And really, instead of just going to NAMM and standing around and talking to people and trying to bring people in and stuff, I wanted to go to his office, prospect, really call back some dealers that he was interested in having, and set up appointments and go to this show and see these appointments through and really see what I had to offer to the business. And so this would have been in January of 2006. And I went to that show, and I think I opened 17 dealers and sold close to 500 guitars.
Wow.
And Joe was impressed enough that he realized he had to hire me at that point. Yeah. Well, listen, man, all the people are going to be expecting to call up and talk to you now. And I was like, I know. So finally I got to be, in my mid 30s, I finally got the job I always wanted as a sales director for a guitar company. Mm-hmm. And we grew really, we had our first $1 million year in 2006, 2007. And then in 2008, when we had that sort of economic reset, it about 40, well, not 40%, but close to 40%, 35%, about a third of our dealers went out of business. Yeah. And we were selling to we were mostly selling to indie stores at that time. And I don't think people realize how hard that was on retail at that point. And of course, now we're coming out of all of this insane pandemic era stuff, and now in the era that we're in, things are starting to get difficult again. Yeah. But then it was really shocking how fast the business fell off then, even for established brands. And we were just kind of finding our own space, and after that happened, I think Joe got tired of the sort of the up and down of it. Joe is a brilliant luthier, and he's a brilliant guitar designer. He has a very uncanny ability to listen to what an artist or an individual is looking for in an instrument and pair them with that instrument, whether it be something that we already do or whether he is coming up with something completely from scratch, like we've done with like Reeves Gabrels or Billy Corgan, Mike Watt, all these guys. Yeah. And that was really his strong suit. And whereas the sales and the day-to-day running thing was the thing that I was really into. And so Joe and I figured out a way for me to buy the company from him, and then hire him back as our exclusive designer and our, head engineer, as it were. Sure. And so leaving Penny and I free to run the business, and basically it took a lot of the stuff that he didn't want to deal with off his desk, right? Yeah. Which is great because it put it all on mine, and it aged me. No, I'm just kidding. It's been great. So the story for me and Joe is really unique. Joe and I became really good friends first, and then I worked for him, and it didn't spoil that friendship. And now he's worked for me for 12 years, and it doesn't spoil that friendship. But then we don't look at it like that. People from the outside always want to look at it like that, but here, that's not really how that feels. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so when he was then freed up from doing the day-to-day sort of grunt work, you know, payroll, taxes, shipping, receiving, parts, this, that, all of that, he started to do the best work of his career. And so it's been a partnership that's worked very, very well. And obviously, I mean, we've grown a lot within the last, 12 years, and now we've become, somewhat of a player in this marketplace, which is really interesting. But your question was, how did I get here? And that is how I got here. So I did a lot of this. I mean, I took a lot of weird turns, but some of them were expensive, but it just seems like with everything that I did, I picked up another piece of the puzzle on the way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've pretty much done that my entire career as well. Like working different jobs to find out that this is where I want to be in the end anyway, but it all led to this.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely.
I think one really cool thing about the Reverend Guitars lineup in general is the ability of the customization of the guitars. And you actually mentioned that was kind of what drew you to them in the first place. So I think, obviously you've got respected artists like Billy Corgan of Smashing Pumpkins, Reeves Gabrel of The Cure, and David Bowie's band. They have signature guitars. There's a huge list of players who actually play the music play the guitars in their bands that might not have their own signature series. But what do you think the reason is? And one of my favorite, by the way, is Mark Knopfler from Dire Straits. I was like, oh man, I got Mark Knopfler playing their guitars. That's pretty awesome. But what do you think is the reason behind these artists trusting Reverend Guitars over your competitors?
It's a good question. There's with a lot of the guys, they're looking, especially Billy's a really good example. Billy is looking for something that's not really available in a stock model from other guitar makers. And when we develop an artist's signature guitar, like with Billy or with Reeves Gabrel's, who you mentioned, there's no preconceived notion of what that guitar should be at the start, right? It is what the artist is looking for specifically and what they want to make work. So Billy, Reeves is a good example because Reeves, his first signature guitar with us was sort of a modified version of one of our stock body shapes. And then he liked some of our other body shapes. And then when he got the gig playing for The Cure, he really wanted to take a little bit of this and a little bit of that and then adds this like secret sauce to it, right? And we can do that for an artist without one of my quotes is we're not held down by the weight of our own legacy. Everything we do doesn't have to fit into 3 or 4 body shapes that we've been making for 75 years. Everything we don't do any double signature model things. If somebody, if Billy is looking for something and part of creating the tone he wants with the resonance he wants is that the neck shape or the way the neck joins the body needs to be this, we can do that and then try to make it, aesthetically pleasing and present it to him. And like I was telling you about Joe, when we did the first Billy Corgan model, aesthetically, he loved it right out of the gate, but he wanted the pickups to have a little bit more something or other. And Joe can sort of listen to him describe what he's looking for and then sit down at his bench with magnets and wires and make that happen, which is why he's such an integral part of what we do, because I don't know what's going on with that. I know that after he makes it, I know I could take it and market it and sell it, but what he's doing there is very special and unique. And so we're offering instruments that have their own character, for for artists who have their own character. Does that make sense without
Absolutely.
sounding too pretentious?
I mean,
You know what I mean?
you
Because I
see
don't want to be
like-
like, but it's true. I mean, that's
Yeah.
really what we're looking to do, and that's what draws those guys to us. The Knopfler thing. So there are some people on our artist roster that I am just super fans of.
Yeah.
And Knopfler is one of them. I just basically stalked him until he started playing something of mine. Because he was like, I think
I'll
he
give it
felt
to you
bad.
for free.
I think
Come
he
back.
felt bad for me. But no, we make this buckshot guitar that we make has got sort of a unique setup as far as having a single coil bridge guitar is concerned. And it's something that I could see working for him for slide.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what he does with it. He's very, very well, he's very famous for playing two instruments. And God love him for that. You know what I mean? And I love everything that he creates on those two instruments. And what I was looking to do was like fill a niche with him. Yeah. And so I think with a lot of legacy artists like that, we're able to come in and fill a niche. If I could talk about a couple of things real quick.
Sure.
A couple of things that we're really proud of that we sell a lot of here is we sell a lot of baritones and we sell a lot of 12 strings. And the reason for that is just not unlike the artist's signature models. When Joe set out to create those guitars, he wasn't like, well, I'm going to make a 12-string, pick legacy guitar here, insert legacy guitar here, and we're just going to put a 12-string neck on this, and this is going to be our 12-string. He sat down with a handful of 12 strings. And we worked very closely, actually, with Chris Funk from the Decemberists on this because he plays a lot of 12 strings and he's a big Reverend fan. Those guys in the Decemberists have a handful of Reverend guitars between them, Colin and Chris do. And we talked to Chris about where the 12 strings that he's always toured with electric 12s in that band. They're featured on a lot of Decemberist songs.
Sure.
So we asked him where the shortcomings were on all the 12s that he used. And then Joe just addressed them systematically. And we ended up with the Reverend Airwave, which it looks like a Reverend still because Joe designed it, of course, but it's got a wildly different set of specifications than any of the other guitars in our line. Yeah. But it stays in tune and it sounds great, and it's made to go on the road, and we have picked up tons of players with that. Baritone, same thing. It's really exciting with the baritone thing because we made a baritone that was designed for guitar players. And it wasn't just like, well, we're going to put a 28-inch neck on this and here you go, it's our baritone. It's sort of a custom scale. The bridge placement is custom so that it's comfortable for a guitar player to sit down with and play. And it's resonated across the industry. Jeremy from Devil Wears Prada just sent me like the nicest email complimenting me on that guitar and how it's worked its way into every live set and recording that those guys have done for the last few years.
Nice.
And I'm super flattered because that's a big, that's a big name in this industry. And it isn't like anything where we set out to like, well, we're going to do the signature model, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. No, he took this guitar that we offer and has made it his own. And that's the goal here, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to do. So,
yeah. And I think, when you talk about the specific niche models and niche types of guitars, I think most, again, legacy brands, Gibson, Fender, stuff like that, they'll do it, but they only do it like they'll put out like one model. They don't really customize it. They don't specify it, unless it's for specifically an artist who says, here's what I want. But yeah, they don't actually go through, spend the time to fix any problems. It's just like, here's what we normally do. We're going to put 12 strings on it and a slightly wider neck or a longer neck or whatever. And that's it. And really they're just looking to use the same body shape of a Les Paul or an SG or whatever they are, an acoustic version of a guitar and kind of do that. But that's why I think I really wanted to come to you guys because, having a talk with like somebody at Gibson or Fender, it's going to be corporate speak, right? Like they're going to talk about, oh, well, we've sold 10 million guitars over the last 10 years. Like nobody cares about that. Like talk about why these ones are such special models. And one of the main reasons I brought you onto this podcast is because I love when people can geek out on kind of like the gear and the specifications behind their instruments.
Yeah.
So I think obviously with Reverend, I mean, it was kind of started on the concept of the Railhammer pickups and the pickups in general, obviously being unique versus what the industry offered. Can you kind of talk about some of the uniqueness of the pickups themselves? And I know you guys
Sure.
actually have Railhammer, and it's now part of the company again. It's branched off for a while.
Railhammer didn't come along until 2011, 2012.
Yeah.
And so Railhammer is one of the byproducts of me giving Joe more time to design stuff.
Yeah.
And so after 2000, he had been toying with the idea in his brain for a while of how he could, let's see, what do I got here? I got one close to me. Check this out. So this is one of Vernon Reed's guitars, of all people. This is a prototype for his PRS signature model that we just put some rail hammers in. These are Reeves Gabrel's signature rail hammers. So Joe had this idea that the blades under the wound strings would keep the bottom end of the guitar really nice and tight and compressed, while the oversized slugs under the plain strings would balance the output of those blades, yet allow you to have sort of a sweeter, warmer tone on the high end. He always liked the compression, especially when you're using a lot of gain or when you're using the neck pickup of a standard humbucker guitar. He always liked the compression of the blades under the wound strings, but found that they made the high end of the guitars way too bright. Yeah. So he figured out a way to combine those things. And what we've ended up with is a humbucker with more clarity than any humbucker that's ever come before it.
Yeah.
And so Joe patented that in 2011, and he went into production with it later in 2011, 2012. And then he was basically running that business on his own out of his house. And I had a handful of artists get interested in it right away. Reeves was interested in it right away. Bob Balch from Fu Manchu. It fit what they were doing, their playing style. I mean, guys that do heavy riffing on the low strings and are really looking for a good lead tone and really like a more vintage lead tone, as it were, especially in Bob's case. And then later, as we started working with Billy, it was the perfect fit for his signature instruments as well, because the boy plays with a lot of gain. But I do want to make clear, and I don't want to be too sales pitchy on here, but the clean tones are amazing too. It's not like these pickups are designed for high gain. For like a jazz box, like an archtop guitar, even that just has a neck position pickup, the Railhammer looks funny, and jazz guys have a tendency to hear with their eyes.
Yeah.
And anytime I've ever gotten somebody to try one of these pickups in an archtop, they're blown away at how full, but what it sounds on the low end without any sort of farting out or overwhelming of even, tube amps and things of that nature. But it's very, very, they're just really unique and really cool. And they're totally passive. I mean, they're just solder them in and go. Yeah. So as that business grew, again, administrating that business was taking up more and more of Mr. Naylor's time. And we have Railhammers featured not only with some of our regular our artists, our non-signature artists, but our bigger artists like Robin Fink from Nine Inch Nails, and so we have all these guys using the Railhammer pickups and the Reverend stuff, and then we have signature artists like Billy Corgan and Kyle Shutt and Reeves Gabrel, Bob Balch. We are making signature guitars for these guys. And Joe is making signature pickups for them. So I was sort of, when Joe decided he didn't want to administrate that business anymore, we took that over from him as well.
Yeah.
And just folded it under part of our umbrella. So we bought the patents from him and all of the paperwork that goes on with them. So we run both of those companies out of the same building, but as separate entities. So you can, unlike the regular, the Reverend pickups like our P90s or our Alnico humbuckers and stuff, we don't offer the Reverend pickups individually for sale, although we should, and we may at some point because they're fantastic. The Railhammer thing is a unique enough thing that we offer that as its own brand on the side. It's got its own dealer network. It has its own marketing footprint, and so Penny and I sort of run both of those companies at the same time.
Nice. It's not like you don't have enough time or anything in your day that you're just like, whatever, I got spare time.
Yeah, right. Let's do this let's do this pickup thing. That'll be a great idea. But it has brought us, it's brought us some that in itself has brought us some attention from some interesting people and some really good players.
Yeah. Well, I think it's very cool. I think it's a great idea because when people talk, they're like, I'm a single coil kind of guy or I'm a humbucker kind of guy. And then they try this kind of stuff when it's like a new, different type of pickup. And they're like, oh, actually, I kind of like this because it takes the pieces that I like of single coil and pieces of humbucker or whatever and kind of fits it together. Yeah,
it does all that. And it's nice just to have something different, Yeah. It's a different way to look at sort of the same thing, right? Yeah. And that uniqueness gives us our own footprint in the marketplace.
For sure. I know you guys take a lot of pride in not just the guitars, but also bass guitars, for professional musicians. But I've seen that you guys actually, I think in an interview or maybe even on your website, you mentioned that you're like a perfect mid-level guitar for people to move up from beginner guitars, right? Do you feel like that has changed at all? Or do you guys kind of solidly position yourself as like the in-between, like super high-end $5,000 guitars or $10,000 guitars and the beginner guitar? Is that kind of where you guys choose to fit?
Yeah, it's a weird vibe. I think that we compete with guitars that cost twice what ours do still. Yeah. While maintaining, affordability for somebody. I mean, we're getting into the top end of the mid-range market, but so if you're watching this in the future, right now, it is September of 2022. And right now, what I consider to be the mid-range of the guitar market is very, very much in flux. And there's a lot of interesting things happening in the guitar business right now. Yeah. It used to be that you could very much draw what the American perception of guitar quality was drawn by countries and city-states. You just went, well, the best stuff is made here. There's some pretty good stuff made here. The stuff that's made here is okay. The stuff that's made here is subpar. And the stuff that's made here is for beginners. Yeah.
For example, if you're going to get a Fender Telecaster, you are going to want it from Corona, California. That's where people are like,
that's you talking, bud.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like when people do that, they're like, oh, did you get it made in America? Is it from Corona? I'm like, does it matter? Like they have good stuff. The Mexican Telecasters are pretty good too.
And so are the Chinese ones. Yeah. I mean, there are some, it's crazy. Where something, Joe and I have talked for many years about what we like to call country of origin versus company of origin. Yeah. So that's one way to look at it. But I'm discovering that first off, you can get anything from anywhere in any price range. That is the hardest thing to grapple with. For me, being a child of the 80s, and being an American in the 1970s and 1980s, stuff that's made in Japan is cheap. You pay this much for it, and yeah, it can be a pretty good value, but this is where that falls, and this is how you're supposed to look at it. Yeah. Stuff that's made in China this is how you're supposed to look at that. Stuff that's made, in America is this thing. stuff that's made in Europe is this thing.
Yeah.
And you have your sort of tiers. I don't think anything fits into those categories now. Guitar companies, and I'm not here to call out names on people and stuff like that. That's not my goal. But there are guitar companies that are making guitars from the $600,000 to $60,000 price range here in the States, and you get what you pay for all across that spectrum.
Yeah.
Ibanez is making premium guitars in Indonesia.
Yeah.
That they are getting $2,000 for, and that isn't anything that was even on the whoever saw that on the horizon, a couple of generations ago. But now with technology being what it is, and with people being more open-minded towards trade and things of that nature, that sort of stuff really doesn't matter. And you really have to look at the instrument for what it is and what went into it and what's behind it and what these companies are trying to accomplish, and then find out what's right for you and try to throw away all the sort of preconceived notions,
Sure.
Like me, I still have funny experiences with that, to be honest with you guys. I've been looking at those Strandberg guitars for years, like, okay, cool. I was over in Korea about 6-7 weeks ago, and a distributor over there that we visited distributes their stuff there and works for them a little bit, and then had a handful of guitars there, and I played probably 8 or 10 of them, and they were fantastic. They were fantastically comfortable. They were set up really well. They're about as strange looking as something can get, but they've accomplished a thing. Yeah. And I think it's pretty damn cool, Yeah. And so I don't, who knows, man? Like I said, that kind of stuff is all over the place. So your original question, of course, is whether or not I still see us in the mid-range. And I'm moving away from thinking about things in terms of price. And well, we have to price this here if we want to sell it or whatever. I think we have a really, really good product at any price point. Yeah. And I think that if it's what you're looking for, then that's great. And for crying out loud, I hope somebody has, and I hear the story all the time of people who, I about once a week I get an email from somebody who's like, I went to the store with $4,000 planning on buying this, and then I picked up your double agent, and I ended up, spending $1,100 with the case, and the guitar is better than what I went in there to get, and I'm so happy with it. Thank you so much. And I'm like, yes, that's what it's about. You know what I mean? That's what we're trying to do. I would think that we're still in the mid-range price-wise compared to what's out there, but it's incredible now too. You got me going, dude. Sorry.
Well, and I'll say the price points have changed over the last 10 years or so. I mean, back when I first bought my first guitar for myself in, 94, 95, I mean, you could get a Fender Telecaster probably for $450, like high-end one. Now you're looking at like $2,000-$3,000. Well, we'll say American made decent.
American standards were probably in that era, because I know a lot about that era of Fender in particular, because I have a bunch of them. Yeah. I really think that this will get me some hate mail. I think that the American standard Strat between say 94 and 98 is the best guitar that they made. Yeah. I really think it's just a fantastic instrument all told. And new, they were $800, $850, $849, something like that. I think a Tele back then was about $799, $899, like right for a good one. And those were cool guitars. Now, when I was a kid, my first guitar was the first one that obviously not the 68 Tele, but when I decided I was going to go get my own guitar. I got this like HSS Kramer thing.
Yeah.
Terrible guitar. Terrible. And it was $199 for like a white shitty Strat copy. Just
Yeah.
There was nothing you could do. There was nothing you could mod on this guitar that was going to make it stay in tune. And I carried that damn guitar around for 6 months too. I was so proud of that thing. And then as I got to be a little bit better, I had to move on from it quickly. But it had a humbucker in the bridge, for crying out loud, and so I could play metal on it, you know.
Yeah.
But that being said, a $200 guitar in the early to mid 80s was absolute garbage.
Yeah.
And now $299 guitar. Let's say $250 is the mark. $250 is a lot less money now than it was in 1985.
Yeah.
And $250 will buy you a lot more guitar now than it did in 1985. Sure. I mean, just with the CNC stuff that goes on, you're getting these tight neck fits, and the tuners are better, you know, and you know, another $150 in mods, and you've got a guitar that you can go out and gig with absolutely no problem.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to me how all of that stuff is sort of always changing and always in flux. It's a very, very complicated conversation.
Yeah, it is. And I was just bringing it up because, you know, when people think of mid-range or mid-price levels, they might be thinking like 1990s pricing versus 2022 pricing.
Without question. That is, sure. And of course, and especially when you're talking to guys who are my age.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, because I was buying guitars in the 90s. So I remember, you know, and the value has changed quite a bit since then.
Yeah.
But that's okay. And we're, you know, I mean, it's all part of how it's done. And then also a lot of that stuff is just a uniquely American perspective on things too. You know what I mean? Because that's how we were raised in this country. You know, our parents and grandparents and people who had anybody from, you know, what they call the greatest generation in their lives, influence them, have a view of this country that's you know, far different from the way the rest of the world looks at us. So it's and I'm not saying whether that's good or bad. I don't have much time in my life for politics, you know.
Yeah.
But I do a lot of international business.
Yeah.
And I sell a lot of guitars all over the world, and it's interesting to me how things like how this conversation is viewed in other countries. It's cool. Sure. It's fascinating, and it all plays into a little bit of what we do. We are still currently making all of our guitars at Mir Music in South Korea, and they largely make guitars there. Like we made guitars here in the late 50s and 60s. I mean, everything in the process is done by hand. Yeah. I was shocked to discover there's like one guy who makes all of our necks.
Wow.
And he's just so good at it that
hopefully he's got an apprentice. So
oh my God. Yeah, you got that right. You got that right. But you know, and what we were able to accomplish by working with Mir isn't. So here's something to think about. We weren't looking for cheap when we set out to manufacture guitars.
Yeah.
We were looking for a company that could do what we needed them to do with the quality that we wanted to get from them.
Yeah.
And they were our best option.
Yeah.
And they've been building guitars for generations in this. It's a small factory. And they've literally been building musical instruments in this factory for forever. And not forever, obviously, but literally for generations.
Yeah.
And so we had, rather than, the easiest way to put this is because I think about this kind of stuff a lot.
Yeah, I manufacture as well from overseas, so I understand.
Yeah. So rather than try to set everything up here and train a bunch of people who have never made instruments before
Yep.
to make this product that we want and to try to get the end result that we want. We went to some people that had decades of experience doing this,
Yep.
presented them with what we were looking for, and were able to get what we wanted from them right away, and
Yep.
didn't have to work into building up to a quality level that we were looking for.
Exactly.
And it just so happens that we were able to do that in South Korea.
Yeah.
And
I will say, by the way, South Korea has some of the best goods in the world, like even better than, China has, good quality manufacturing. But from what I found, if you can buy goods from South Korea, they have some of the best goods around the board, electronics or otherwise, in South Korea.
It's true. They're very much in flux as a culture now.
Mm-hmm.
As we were going into sort of our generation, there's fewer and fewer people working in factories and doing things by
Yep.
hand. Because the youth there has been raised. I mean, it's a first world country,
Yep.
I mean,
They want to be on
you-
TikTok too.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's it, So it's going to be interesting to see where all of that goes. But again, with the quality of instruments that we're seeing, coming out of the Indonesia, by the way, and Ibanez is doing some really nice stuff, and as is PRS and other brands. It's heartening. And
Yeah.
I just hope that we can sort of keep all of this goodwill amongst nations going, right? And and everybody tap into that, because really the customer has benefited,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that sounds like a cliche too, but that the fact that the under $500 guitar now can be such a good quality instrument, and what you're looking at in our price range now are instruments that were custom shop instruments 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And what the custom shop people are doing now is they're doing all these incredible art pieces and doing all this just crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And because all these other markets have been allowed to flourish, it's sort of expanded what you can get out of the electric guitar. I'm probably going to get in trouble for all of this.
Well, I'll make sure to put a bunch of disclaimers
but
Ken
it's
Haas is
true.
not responsible for saying any of the words out of his mouth.
Yeah, right. But this is, I don't want to be like talking cliche guy or whatever, but I love guitars.
Yeah.
And I have lots of them. And I still buy them and sell them, and I probably don't sell like other brands and vintage stuff. And I probably don't sell stuff as often as I should anymore.
Yeah.
Because, but I see things that I think are interesting, and I want to experience it, And I've got a Cower like Firebird thing that I can see from my field of vision here. And it's got the biggest neck I've ever seen on a guitar. It's super. It's not for me, but I respect it. I like it. You know what I mean? Like I get what I get what he's done there, and it's a pretty cool guitar.
Yeah.
I really like looking at it for sure.
Well, I have a question for you since you brought up your love of guitars.
Fire away.
You have tons of models and makes and designs through the Reverend guitar. Which one would you say that's been your favorite over the years of the Reverend line?
I like the Jetstream stuff is my favorite. Okay. My current favorite guitar to play is a signature model that we do for a guy in England named Matt West, and he's the guitar player for a pop punk band called Neck Deep. Absolute monster rhythm player, monster right hand, and so he's such a cool dude. So Neck Deep was touring the U.S. 5 or 6 years ago, 7 years ago, and they stopped by my shop at 8 a.m. between Pittsburgh and Grand Rapids, Michigan, like where we're right in the middle. And they were doing an overnight drive, and they came here early in the morning, and he wheeled in like his whole Kemper rig and a 412 cab, and he played a bunch of guitars, and he got one of my Jetstream 390s from me. And to me, that Jetstream body, which is, I keep raising the wrong finger when I look at myself.
Mirrored.
This is the Jetstream body. To me, that Jetstream design is very comfortable, and when I look at it, I think Reverend. It's got the offset, there I gotta do it right. It's got the offset waist, it's got the protruding upper horn. I did it again. Got that protruding upper horn. that helps balance really well. And it's got the Reverend bolt-on neck, which has, been the Joe's neck shape for the last 25 years. And
Yeah.
I love that guitar. So he grabs one of these and he plays the P90 version. He loves it. He buys a couple guitars for me. A couple days later, he calls me on the phone and says, listen, that Jetstream 390, that's my all-time favorite guitar. It's the guitar that I'm going to use forever. From now on, this is it. And it would be the perfect guitar in the world for me if it just had that bridge P90 and a reverse headstock. And I went, and I pictured it in my head. And then I said to him, guy I've only known for 48 hours, hey man, want to do a signature model? One of the very, very few signature models that didn't have anything to do with Naylor when it came to working with the artist, because he already said the guitar was perfect. So I didn't really need to drag poor Joe into it. And I'm a bridge pickup guy. I'm an all controls wide open guy. I'm a reverse headstock guy. I just love everything about it. And it's a super fun guitar to play. And it's what I use in Jay Navarro and the Traitors. I have 2 black ones that I drag all over the world with me. And I love them.
Well, let me ask you about that. Why do you prefer reverse headstock? Because for me, I guess it doesn't really matter. But when you look at it, it's kind of like when you watch Jimi Hendrix playing an upside down guitar, you're like, that looks weird. I don't know why, but that just looks weird.
Let me do this with my hands. Let me get them over here. Let me get my hands positioned right. Okay. So you see how the offset waist goes like this, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you were to take that to the headstock and the headstock was reversed, you're following that same line. So the line you're looking at goes, I can't even do it. I can't do this backwards with my hands. It's a good thing that this isn't like some sort of drunk driving test. You see this line that the offset waist makes that I'm making with my hand? If you take that up and you put a reverse headstock on it, it's the same line. And in my mind, that balances and looks really cool.
Nice.
And then also when you're playing guitar, your hands are on the bottom of the neck, right?
Yeah.
So then if you have to tune a string real quick, your hands are still on the bottom of the neck.
Gotcha.
As opposed to having to reach over to the top. And I'm totally used to reaching over. I'm not a diehard about either of these things. I just like it. And there's people that are like, dude, I can't believe you play reverse headstocks. It looks so stupid and I can't get used to it. All due respect. That's cool, man. I get that. That's totally your thing. I just dig it. And so, so that's my favorite one. But I also play the hell out of a Pete Anderson Eastsider S, which is this sort of T-shaped thing that we've been doing since 2010 for Pete Anderson, a Grammy Award-winning guitarist for Dwight Yoakam and songwriting partner with many artists over the years, including one of my favorites, Kurt Kirkwood. He produced a great Meat Puppets record, and he also produced Kurt's solo record. And Pete's one of my heroes too for that alone. And we started making a hollow body guitar with him in about 2008, and then we started doing this T-style solid body in 2010. And I had one of those. Well, we never really saw ourselves doing guitars in that shape. It was something that Pete really wanted to do, and after talking to Pete, Joe decided that we had something to offer with our sort of specific set of specifications: the Carina body, the roasted maple neck, the locking tuner, the Wilkinson trem. There were things that we could put on this guitar that would make it unique and special. And Pete really liked it, and so I had one of those get damaged in shipping right out of the very first run.
Wow.
And it got pretty beat up. UPS really did a number on this thing, shipping it to California. I think it arrived in California not in the box anymore.
Wow.
So I got this poor guitar back, and my tech here made it playable. And I took it to a gig, and in one of the bands I play in, this Polka Floyd band, it has been to every gig since. And we play a lot, and the guitar's really trashed. It's one of my favorites. It's a lot of fun. It's a really fun thing to people are like, when are you going to make a relic? I'm like, I don't make relics.
Yeah.
You make relics.
Exactly. That's what you're
Buy one of these guitars and play the shit out of it, and then you'll have what you're looking for.
I hate that concept of like pre-sold worn jeans. I'm like, that's why I buy them new, so I can wear them, like not so somebody else can pre-wear them.
I get it. I get it. I like to pick on it too, but I mean, I understand, and I'm glad that it exists, and it's, the only time it really gets to be that I gotta laugh is when somebody's like, if somebody gets a guitar from me and there's like a speck of dust in the binding or something, and they're like,
wow.
oh, I can't believe I paid $11.99 for this guy's speck of dust in the binding. Meanwhile, there's guys paying $4,000 for guitars that are beat to shit. But okay.
I was going to say, because a couple of the models that you make, that I haven't played them all yet because I've only played about 2 or 3 models that you guys have. But
well, when are you going to come over here?
But yeah, that's my next question: is when are you going to invite me to Detroit so I can come and play them all?
Yeah, you're invited, but you got to come to Toledo though.
Oh yeah, that's right.
You can go to Detroit and visit one of our dealers and play them all. But you want to come here? We're sunny, beautiful Toledo, Ohio.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I live in Las Vegas, so maybe I'll join you next summer when it's actually warm.
Nice. You're looking forward to the F1 race next year.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan, but it's going to be an interesting. I've watched Formula One for a while here and there, but it's going to be interesting to see how, because they're already starting to lay out the track, which it's weird.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, I'll be there. We're planning. Penny and I are planning on attending.
Very cool.
I haven't been to Vegas. The last time I was in Vegas, I think I did an in-store at the Sam Ash there on
like Eastern or something.
Yeah. Nice store. The manager of that store is a really cool dude. Really cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say some of these the models that I like to look at wise. The Roundhouse RA, that looks absolutely incredible. I was like, damn, that's a huge the first one that popped off. I was like, that guitar is gorgeous. And then as a Telecaster fan, I like the Charger 290. And then, like you were mentioning, the Eastsiders, the Pete Anderson models, they look pretty cool. And I think even 2 of the 3 models have a tremolo bar, which Fenders, unless you specifically get a signature model or something, do not usually come with tremolo bars. So that was pretty cool because I had a Dean for years, and I'm like, I like playing the tremolo bar. I don't know why. I would use it every once in a while, but with a Telecaster, I don't have that option. So I'm like, I guess I'll just abandon that now.
It's fun on that platform. And then mounting that T-style pickup directly into the body does a thing there too.
Yeah.
That's just, it makes it, unique, a unique array of tones. It's like having a Strat with a really usable bridge pickup, and not to say that Strats don't have a usable bridge pickup, but it's an acquired taste for their sort of stock single coil thing, which is why you see so many people putting Hot Rails or whatever the pickup of the week is, in the bridge position of their Strat. Whereas that our Eastsider S really gives it's really got some punch and sustain while still having that sort of glassy shimmer thing, which I think is very cool. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I probably have like 10 more questions for you, but in to try to keep this a little bit shorter and not ramble on all day long, I do want to just ask you, what do you guys have in store? Where do you see Reverend going from here? Because, you have Fenders and Gibsons who have, historically dominated the guitar market as far as like name recognition. Do you guys, I know you've mentioned before, you still have people saying like, I've never heard of you guys before. Do you see a wide open ocean out there?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I still do. Penny and I like to go to we don't go to a lot, but we go to a few public guitar events outside of just going to the NAMM shows. The 2 that we hit every year are the Fall Philly Guitar Festival, which is coming up here in about 6 weeks in Oaks, Pennsylvania, which is about 45 minutes north and west of Philadelphia proper. And it's a really cool guitar show. They do one in the summer and the fall. We only go to the fall one. And then in May, we go to the Dallas International Guitar Festival, which I often recommend to people who are, if you're just into guitars, you got to go to the Dallas show. The guy who runs that show, he has live music on 2 or 3 different stages all day, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I bring in artists. I've brought Pete Anderson, Reeves Gabrels, Rick Vito, Greg Koch. I bring in artists every year. Jimmy, Andy Timmons, Johnny Highland. I saw Paul Gilbert there this year. He destroyed. It was absolutely awesome. Nice. I've seen Neil Schon, Nugent, big names. Frank Hanna from Tesla was there this year doing a
Wow.
clinic. I mean, like it's a really and then you can just pay admission and see all these people and then walk around on the floor with them, you know. And then there's booths there, there's manufacturers there. Like we've been there every year for 25 years. But also, I mean, bigger manufacturers, smaller manufacturers, pickup guys, pedal guys, accessories people, and then mixed in with all of that is a bunch of vintage stuff. And so it's really fun. It's a really fun event. And so I'll go to an event like that, and you know, a few times a day, people who are really into guitars will come in and say to Penny and I, "Reverend, what's that? I never heard of that. Tell me about it." And and of course, like human nature, part of me is like, God damn, how long do we have to do this?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But the thing is that's great. Like, because it just means that we're not like saturated in some marketplace. You know what I mean? Like we're still, there's still something that's exciting about what we're doing, and we're still reaching new eyes and new people every time we do something new and go into someplace new. So it's exciting. I would just like to see that vibe continue.
Nice. Yeah. I was going to say the reason I actually found
that's
out
where
about
we're going.
Yeah. The reason why I found out about Reverend was because about 2 years ago, one of my longtime friends was like, I'm looking at this guitar. It's actually my fiance's uncle that invented the guitars. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, it's Reverend. Her uncle is Joe Naylor. And that's how I found out about it, because my friend is getting married to his niece. I was like,
that's cool.
That's crazy. Like, what a small world. But yeah, it's like, I got to play his Billy Corgan signature model. I was like, that's a pretty cool guitar, man. I still have to play more to see, like, cause like you said, every guitar's got a different feel than other guitars. So yeah.
Yeah. And by design, you know, it's cool. And we have a lot of models too, dude. It's insanity. But that's the thing. Like Joe keeps coming up with stuff, and then it's hard for us to leave stuff behind because everything sells, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're like, you know, even though like we've been looking at something for a long time here, that doesn't mean that the rest of the world is you know, done with it or whatever, you know, or even knowledgeable of it yet or whatever. So we have a tendency to sort of keep things going, maybe, which has led to us having a lot of different models, and it's a lot of fun for sure. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, do you have anything else before we go today that you want to mention that you guys have coming up in the near future for Reverend, that, you know, maybe a little sneak peek of a new model, or, you know, just in general, people want to check out from Reverend?
Oh, just you wait.
Just piles of guitars sitting next to him.
we have a couple of really cool things coming out before the end of the year.
Nice.
And we have some new signature models coming out before the end of the year too, or right after the first of the year. So we've got a lot of fun. There's always something in store, man.
Yeah.
It's very, very exciting. So
That's awesome.
I don't have anything that I can really give you a sneak peek of off the top of my head, not in here with me right now.
Yeah.
But yes, to answer your question though, oh yeah, there's stuff coming. In the immediate future though, we are, that's not entirely true. Actually, let me grab this. The Billy Corgan Z1 pickups. So his new pickup design with the moon and the stars. Yeah. These are going to be made available to all Railhammer dealers within the next probably 4 to 6 weeks. Okay. And we are offering them not just in chrome, but also with that etch work done in black and gold. Nice. So I'm really, really excited to have those hit the market.
Is it like a matte black, or is it all glossy ones?
Gloss.
Nice.
Gloss, yes.
Very cool. Yeah. Awesome.
And then we can talk about my bands in your speed round if you want to.
Okay. I was going to say one last.
You're going to talk about rock. Yeah. Fire away. Yeah.
I was going to say one last question before we sign off of this portion. What new music from, you know, this year, maybe the last year or so, would you recommend people go check out?
Man, that's rude. That's just rude. I listen to so much stuff that it's difficult for me to narrow down any one thing. So I don't know where to go with that. I pay a lot of attention to what Reverend artists are up to, of course.
Sure.
And that's where I get a lot of the music that I listen to lately. As it should be. If you haven't checked out Wye Oak, you should definitely check out Jen Wasner and Wye Oak. They're a fantastic band. The new thing that's coming from Fu Manchu, they just dropped a bunch of like singles that were just fantastic. Their last couple albums have been amazing, and I think their last one flew a little bit under the radar, Clone of the Universe, which if you're a guitar person, it's worth checking out because side 2 is this giant epic song that features not only, Scott and Bob playing guitar, but Alex Lifeson also plays lead.
Oh, wow.
And then Bob does a bunch of interesting things too. So he also has Sun and Sail Club, which are wicked awesome. And then he and Reeves Gabrels have collaborated on stuff as well, which is amazing. So if you just follow Bob Balch, just about anything he does is ridiculous if you're a guitar guy. And what else? My son took me to see Covet a couple of months ago, and that was I've obviously heard him playing it for years and listened to it in the car with him and all that stuff, but to see them perform live, Yvette's special for sure, and that's a non-Reverend thing, you know what I mean? That's just fabulous. So yeah, there you go. You go. There's a few things anyway.
Yeah. Well, I definitely want to thank you, Ken, for taking the time to talk with us today and being on the show. Guys, make sure to go to the show notes below this episode to check out all the guitars, check out Ken's music, all the bands that he's in. I really like the Polka Floyd idea because I was like, love Pink Floyd. It's my favorite band, but making it polka, that's pretty cool. And then Jay Navarro and the Traitors. Obviously, Jay Navarro, known for being the Suicide Machines lead singer as well, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
So yeah, very cool. Remember, guys, go check out those show notes and get those links and go over, check out the guitars. If you've never heard of Reverend Guitars, go to your nearest local dealer and just pick up one and see if you like it because they're pretty rad guitars. And also remember that the Powered by Rock podcast is powered by our listeners. If you want to show us some support, please be sure to subscribe and share this podcast on social media as well. You can also make a donation to the podcast to help us keep making some awesome episodes with some awesome guests like Ken here. You can find that link in the notes as well. You can see the full video interview on our YouTube channel and Spotify now as well. If you want to check out some articles, album reviews, lists, and interviews, go to poweredbyrock.com to read our absolutely free rocking blog. Also, you can check out that site to find merch and gear as well, so you can pick up some items to play and look like a rock legend. That's our show for today. We'll see you soon for the next episode. Rock on.
Supposed to be easy.